Hello, fiendlings, how the hell are you? I've been outlining a new novel the past couple of days and I'm making progress on it. With any luck, I'll have it done later this week and can submit it to the publisher along with the manuscript for the new novel. I like being ahead of deadlines. It's a first. On top of that, I've been listening to Australian radio and movies while attempting to perfect a less than painful Aussie accent. I'll need that considering I have to begin recording Oceania next week and make some significant progress on it if y'all want an uninterrupted feed of the black. But that's for later. Right now, it's time to find out what's happening with Black Company. Be safe, have a great couple of days, and we'll talk again Friday. Here's episode 8 of Neptune Scars.
Chapter 14. Dickerson showered in the stateroom, luxuriating in the hot water. It had been a long, frustrating, interesting day, to say the least. 3 sleeps and he'd be aboard Von On and heading for Proxima with Rana, a Marine he barely knew, Elliot, and Murdoch. Void wept. Well, look at it this way, he told himself. Murdoch will either come back a real Marine or he won't come back. His sarcastic grin faded as he realized what that meant. Murdoch might be clueless at times, might even be a complete failure as a Marine most of the time, but he was still a Trident Station Marine. Joking about him snuffing it wasn't professional nor acceptable. Dickerson bent and allowed the water to scald his neck for a moment before slowly rising and rubbing a hand over the stubble atop his head. His hip ached a bit. The nannies would probably take care of that while he slept. At least he hoped so. When he finally felt like turning off the shower, he stepped out of the chamber and onto the warmed portion of deck. Like him or hate him, the new trio had splurged on making things comfortable. A heated deck plate just outside the shower stall? Couldn't get much better than that. Unless they'd added a jacuzzi, that was. He quickly dried off and walked naked into the stateroom. Callie was already on her side of the bed, fast asleep. He grinned, knowing he had something to do with that. It might seem creepy to others, but he loved to watch her sleep. In the space of 10 or 20 minutes, her face changed as though whatever dreams she was having punished her, pleasured her, or merely carried her through unconsciousness. But it was her, alive, breathing. He'd had countless nightmares of waking up only to find out that she'd died, that she'd never been rescued from the flotsam they'd survived on while the Battle of the Scar raged around them. That he'd been brought back to Trident only to discover the 2 women he loved had died. He crept across the room as quietly as he could before sliding into bed next to her. His skin, still warm from the shower, grazed hers and she reacted by pushing backward toward him. Grin returned. He covered them both and pulled her to him. After a moment, she settled, and so did he. He draped one arm over her and her breath immediately became rhythmic, slow and deep. At least he could do one thing right. Nothing else in this world. He could comfort a sleeping lover. Considering all that was fucked up in the universe, he thought it a good skill to have. He and Went had run the company, such as it was, through a series of mag walking and mag scramble drills, and they were all mostly hopeless. Lance Corporal Elliot had sounded as though he were ready to kill 2 in his squad. When Dickerson had looked at who that was, he hadn't been surprised to find out Elliot really just wanted to kill Murdoch. PFC Copenhagen, on loan from the bridge for training, had glared at the young Marine before pushing her hands against the shattered SV-52 hull and shouting at him to activate his fucking gloves. Dickerson would have felt bad for Murdoch if the gloves or boots had been defective, but nope, they hadn't been. Murdoch, on the other hand, was a different matter. The kid was likable enough, and he had apparently done fairly well during the cleanup after the Battle of the Scar, but since Dickerson had come out of the medbay to take charge of the company with Callie, Murdoch had seemed flustered and unable to focus. He appeared to be spending less time with the company outside of training and meals. Dickerson was beginning to worry the kid was sliding. Not a good way to live your life. Dickerson knew of several infantry that had committed suicide or otherwise mentally self-destructed after long periods away from home. For Murdoch, just like the rest of them, there was no going home. For them, Trident Station was the only home left in the solar system. No leave, no chance for a vacation. Trident Station would forever be a place of work and combat and nothing else. The more Dickerson considered that fact, the more he wanted a THC vape and a Troom soundscape. At least he had Kelly and Black. 5 weeks at least of not communicating with either Callie or his SE friend. Unless Von On had QE comms to Trident Station or the trio themselves, he doubted it was even possible. Then again, it wouldn't hurt to ask. Tomorrow he'd talk to Black about Von On, see if he could get some tips. Which was strange when he thought about it. He hadn't needed a manual to befriend Black or Portunas. Why would he need one for Von On? Because Von On is from the collective and you don't know what those sneaky fucks are up to. That was the real problem. He minded being away from Callie and the station that long, but it was bearable. Being locked inside Von On with no place to go, no backup within 4.2 light years, and no control of the helm, that was terrifying. The fact Von On wouldn't tell them exactly why the collective needed to travel to Proxima just added more fuel to the paranoia fire. Couple that with the talk of new suits and weapons, and Dickerson smelled bullshit. There was another reason. He was afraid he knew what it was, too. If the Exos had eaten Proxima, the collective would want to explore to see what had survived and what damage they had left in their wake. Theory 2 was that the Exos had come through on their way to Sol. Maybe they just passed Proxima by so they could munch on humanity. The third, the one that really had him worried, was that the collective knew the Exos were still in that system, still damaging the system, and there was something else they needed for whatever solution they had in mind. Of the three, he hoped they blipped into a dead system, took a few pictures, and headed back completely empty-handed and without a single strange or fucked up thing happening the entire time. That's option 4, he thought to himself, the one in daydream land. Von On could carry him and the rest of his squad straight into an Exo ambush, or maybe right into the midst of their brood, or fleet, or whatever you wanted to call the nests of the things with the silver saliva dripping off their fangs, and he opened his eyes and stared at the back of Callie's head. Just the thought of fighting those things again had been enough to send him into a near panic attack. He really thought he was going to be able to handle another encounter? You can, and you will, a voice growled in his mind. Dickerson grinned and his heart slowed, breathing slowing and deepening. Whenever those memories tried to bite him or freeze him, he heard Gunny Cartwright's voice in his mind. Only he didn't hear the man he'd fought with at Trident and Mira. He heard the man from the Mars insurrection. Younger, maybe, but just as gruff and commanding. It was a voice he missed, a man he missed, the very one he was supposed to somehow replace. Maybe getting away for a while would be good. He may have come close to accepting Carb's loss, but he knew he hadn't quite dealt with every other fucked up thing that had happened aboard Mira, Red, and Trident. That might take a lifetime. The solution was to face the nightmares that crawled and swooped through his sleep. He knew that, but facing them in a combat suit was different than fighting them in dreams. In one, you died. He could always opt out of the mission. He'd been given that opportunity and could exercise it with no questions asked. At least that's what Dunn had told Callie. Dickerson thought reality might be a bit different. Still, it was nice of them to offer him an out. If he took it, though, it would change his relationship with the command crew and possibly Callie herself. Besides, like he had anything better to do than train hapless troops? You mean Murdoch? He nearly laughed aloud, but curled himself tighter around Callie instead. She stirred and made a sound that caused him to leer for a moment. I'll go, he thought, but I'll need to figure out Von On first. Considering how short a time he had, he hoped it would be as easy as he hoped, knowing damned well it wouldn't be. Chapter 15. The station alarm split the dream world apart for both Kelly and Dickerson. She practically smacked her head backward directly into his skull, but hit his shoulder instead. He yelped and rolled off the bed, his large body awkwardly falling to the floor in a heap. As the klaxon continued, her wristband buzzing like an angry hornet, she ran to the locker and pulled on her jumpsuit. Dickerson was doing the same. Kelly stabbed her wrist. Kelly Moore to Talby. Talby here. Prep infantry to protect Trident. Dickerson and I are headed to the muster point. Good. Get suited up, quickly. Aye, aye, sir, she said as she stomped her feet into her mag boots. Dickerson was still trying to get into his jumpsuit. I'm out, she said and jogged to the hatch. I'll catch up, he said, nearly losing his balance. Kelly rolled her eyes as she opened the hatch and pelted down the corridor to the slip point. She quickly glanced to ensure she wouldn't run anyone over and dove inside it. Feeling as though she were falling, she slowly rotated until she was feet first instead of head first. The infantry module, more than large enough to house 2 platoons, quickly came into view through the transparent aluminum. 2 suited figures waited for her, each with their helmets beneath their arms. The moment she left the slip point, she headed directly for her locker. Elliot and Copenhagen finished gearing up while Kelly got into her suit. By the time she was half finished, Murdoch, Oakes, Dickerson, Talby, Wendt, and 2 SFN pilots had come through the slip points, each running for their suits. The moment Kelly donned her helmet, the comms came to life.
Kalimura,
Dunn said.
the Major will join us in a minute, but here's the situation. Our ScarNet just went critical. Either something is trying to come through, or we missed a batch of exos somewhere. Either way, we need infantry on the skiffs and the SVs and ready for a fight.
Aye, sir, Kelly said and switched to the squad comms. Dickerson, infantry to your skiffs, squatted up. Major Talby, 1 escort, 1 scout. Dickerson had already said copy loud and proud, suit only half on. He made eye contact with her and gave her a curt nod before barking at Murdoch and focusing on getting his own shit together. Kelly left the squad room and headed to the hangar bay, knowing full well Dickerson's Marines would be walking in here soon enough. Rather than waiting for Oakes to appear, she made her way to his SV Null, the picture of a surfboard with 7 starfish and 3 pine cone-shaped icons beneath it. A blazing caption read, "Ride the dark waves." The letters distorted, as if by ripples in a pond. She opened the gunnery cockpit and stepped inside, her mind already running through the list of pre-flight checks and steps, what she could do to save Oakes time, and the things that would only slow them down. Gravity generators, nuclear reactor online, avionics online, grav cannons warming up, flechettes loaded, and 1 nuke. Good enough. The craft vibrated just enough for her to feel through her suit. She wondered if the next design the collective came up with would remedy that, or if it was just a side effect of the grav engines.
Air support,
Dunn said.
ETA.
Oakes immediately called back.
Blue 1 in the air in 30 seconds, sir. Copy,
Dunn said. 30 seconds, Kelly thought. That was pushing it. Next thing she knew, Oakes had scrambled into the cockpit, connected to the interfaces, and the SV Null moved forward smoothly and slowly.
Ready, Kalimura?
Aye, sir. The SV Null pulled 6 Gs as it instantly accelerated, the 2 Marines pinned to their couches. The nearly rectangular craft shot away from the launch tube like a flechette round. The darkness of the tube shattered, replaced by Neptune's radiant blue glow and the lights of Trident Station. A large ship had already departed from the starport, its maneuvering engines burning like pilot lamps. Black was on the move. Kelly wondered if Dunn was aboard her. Probably not, though. Black was most likely running solo. Just like the last time, she thought. Then she saw what had caused the alert. The Neptune Scar crackled with lightning.
Blue 1 en route to safe zone,
Oakes said.
Copy,
Dunn said.
Blue 2 en route to safe zone,
Talby said.
Copy, air. Infantry. Red 1 and Red 2 leaving the barn,
Dickerson said.
Copy, infantry. Red and Blue, take up position at safe zone. Patrol and hold. I repeat, patrol and hold until you get the all clear. Aye, air. Aye, infantry. Artillery. Status.
Fortunas immediately answered.
All cannons responding. Copy, artillery.
If they needed the trio firing weapons, they were already in deep trouble, but it was SOP to have them on standby. She didn't like to think of the day they'd find out just how good the trio were at defending themselves. The SV Null accelerated away from Trident Station until it reached the edge of the so-called safe zone. A zone was considered the distance a skiff could travel in under a solar minute to get back to Trident Station. Granted, a gravitic skiff could move damned fast, and Dunn expected any fleeing skiff to move at full speed, but any more than a minute exposed the infantry to far too much risk. The SV Null fired several burns and all but came to a halt. Neptune floated behind them, a new set of storms appearing on its far horizon. Trident Station looked like a child's model rather than a multi-billion metric ton conglomeration of modules, wheels, and spires. Kelly plotted Black's position and looked for her in space. It took a moment, but Kelly finally saw the moving dot of color heading for the Scar. Now that they were closer, the jags of lightning spreading across the seams looked less like electricity and more like plasma.
Done to command crew. We have alerts, but no sign of enemy activity. Remain on patrol.
Infantry copy, Kelly said.
Air copy,
Oakes said. She immediately flipped to the infantry channel. Dickerson, stay sharp, no movement.
Aye, sir,
he drawled. She hated how calm he sounded. Even while they were surrounded by exos and both dying, he managed to keep his sense of humor and not panic. Was he afraid? Or was he actually looking forward to blasting an exo in memory of Carb? How did she even ask him that question? And would he even know the answer? Don't you want payback? Fuck yes, Kelly answered the alien voice. She trained as a gunner. She trained as a pilot. The past month had been head down learning skills she'd never intended to have, but now desperately needed. Trident desperately needed. Given a chance, she'd blast as many of the bastards as she could. As long as Oaks kept them in the sky, she'd gladly fill the exos with flechettes and grav pulses.
Lieutenant?
Oaks asked.
I've got nothing on my scope apart from black.
Same, Kelly said. Guessing she'll get in range soon.
Another couple of minutes,
he agreed.
Not to step on your toes, Lieutenant, but from what I saw a few minutes ago, we probably all need to drill on getting our pants on.
She chuckled. Aye, sir. I was thinking much the same thing.
But didn't want to suggest it because your pilot was late.
No comment, sir, she grinned. Oaks laughed.
You're learning.
Black headed out into space, sans crew. Except for the live block connection she shared with the commander and the intermittent radio chatter, she was in her own universe. Neptune and Trident Station behind her, the scar in front of her, and growing larger with every meter she traveled. She flipped the ship and blasted the gravitic engines to decelerate before flipping again and using attitude thrusters to maintain course. Multicolored bands of light writhed across the scar, its normally off-black hue bright and impossible to miss. Whatever was happening on the other side had produced some kind of EMR whose radiation had broken through into this dimension, universe, galaxy. How could you name something when you didn't even know what it was? Dimension was the term she decided to go with. It served well enough. The sensors she deployed on her last visit to the scar had detected the rise in EMR as well as the visual phenomenon and sounded the alarm. Black continued scanning the area, her sensors far more powerful than the nanoprobes scattered across the scar's length and width. She'd expected to see a cluster of the creatures come through the massive rent, or several dozen lying in wait. Instead, nothing. Nothing had come through, but the scar was alive with light and EMR emissions. The sensor also claimed an intermittent release of gravitons, which made little sense. EMR shouldn't have anything to do with disturbing gravitons, much less emit them. Dr. Reed was already babbling to her on the science channel, but she had effectively muted him, responding with simple answers rather than in-depth explanations, mainly because she didn't have any. All she could do was watch and wait, monitor the sensors, and devise a few thousand simulation runs. She already had multiple theories as to the light show's cause, but wouldn't be able to test any of them. Unless something came through, all they would have were theories. Dr. Reed would be insufferable for the next few dozen shifts as he tried to make sense of the phenomenon, asking the trio to tweak new sims, guess, and waste everyone's time. Well, that was a bit unfair. Dr. Reed might be her least favorite human to deal with and might at times appear to be clinically insane or sociopathic, but he was brilliant in his own way. Black imagined that in time he would come up with an explanation. She just hoped he had one before the scar actually let something through. Chapter 16. Talby, Oaks, Kellymora, and Dickerson sat around a table in the briefing room. A holo display glowed with Black's silent, majestic avatar. On the display's other window was a cam feed of the scar, lightning spreading across it in random waves and pulses. Okay, Marines, Talby said. I'll keep this as short as I can. We had an emergency muster, and we were all a little bit behind. Heads nodded around the table, including Callies. Gunny, Dickerson, and Lieutenant Kellymora should come up with drills and procedure. Callie glanced at Dickerson, and he had the hint of a blush coloring his cheeks. Should have done it weeks ago, sir, he said sheepishly. Talby didn't grin, but his eyes were soft and sympathetic. Let us know when we can get those, Lieutenant. You'll have it later this shift, she said confidently. Good, Talby said. Now, that seemed to be the root cause of all of our problems, unless I'm mistaken, that is. The support craft were ready to go, no problems in leaving the bays apart from waiting for tardy Marines. I didn't see any other issues. Anyone else? No one spoke. Good. Now, he said and pointed to the window displaying the eerie, eldritch scar. That thing is still hopping and jumping. Black, what can you tell us? Her avatar brightened slightly, a few drips of color swirling around its tentacles and stalks. The scar is releasing the same amounts of EMR we first detected upon hitting it with gravitons. However, it is also now emitting gravitons. Whether it just started doing that or if our detection of the particles is the result of more powerful sensors, I do not know. Talby nodded, as if he already knew what she'd say. He probably did. What's the concentration, Black? Dickerson asked. High enough to jack up our suits? No, she said. The levels are hardly enough to be noticed by less than extremely sensitive equipment. I imagine the particles are essentially debris from whatever process is taking place on the other side of the scar. Tar, baby, Dickerson muttered. Talby glanced at him. What's that, Gunny? Dickerson's eyes popped as though he hadn't realized he'd spoken aloud. Sorry, sir, I feel like the scar is a tar baby of sorts. What's a tar baby? Kelly asked. Dunno if they ever really existed, but the folktale was something about a rabbit and a figure made of tar. Rabbit was tricked by a wolf and fox into punching the tar baby and its fist stuck fast. The rabbit continued trying to get free, smacking the tar baby until it was completely trapped. He paused as though he'd realized something. Then what happened? Oakes asked. Think they ate him, Dickerson said in an unsure voice. The room went quiet for a moment. Talby finally broke the silence, saying, You think the scar is a tar baby? Dickerson nodded. Just feels as though we should leave it alone, sir, at least until we understand what's happening. Talby gave a curt nod. Thank you for speaking freely, Gunny. What say the rest of you? Oakes crossed his arms and shook his head. Thinking Gunny's right on this one, Major. I don't like what I saw. Kelly said, Whatever we do, I believe we should take care not to aggravate it, sir. Passive scans only. Talby rolled his eyes. Dr. Reed will have a conniption fit. Kelly wasn't sure what to say to that. She could have snapped about him being a civilian, but she would have been preaching to the choir. Truth was, when it came to Reed, only the commander had sway and authority over him. Kelly hoped that changed in the near future. She'd love to get that man in a combat suit. Black? Talby asked. The avatar pulsed a few times. Gunny is correct, sir, the SE said. If we are to perform a live test of some kind, I suggest we do it elsewhere. As in where? Talby asked with a raised eyebrow. There isn't exactly another scar. No, she agreed. But there is the place Pluto used to be. The room fell quiet again, and Kelly felt as though Black had sucked all the air out of the room, not to mention the heat, although she knew the goose pimples weren't from temperature. No one apart from probes had visited Pluto's space, and many of those had gone dark, the QE systems breaking down, or the probes themselves malfunctioning. If they wanted to know everything that was happening at Pluto, someone would have to go out there. An SE like Black would have to go by herself or with a crew, but it would have to be a ship. Period. Pluto, Talby muttered. I'll have to speak to the commander about that idea. Anyone have anything else related to the muster? No one spoke. Good. Oakes, Black, you're both dismissed. We have some private matters to attend to. Oakes saluted and left the room, a knowing grin on his face as Black's avatar disappeared from the holo display. Without Black's presence, Kelly felt as though the room were missing something. Then again, that could just be the fact Dunn hadn't decided to join them. Lieutenant, have you and Gunny Dickerson chosen the Marines for the Von On mission? Kelly nodded and realized her stomach felt as though it had fallen through the deck. Once she said what she said, it would be done. But wasn't it already done? Aye, sir. Murdoch, Elliot, Rana, and Dickerson will join the mission, she said, her voice cracking on her lover's name. Talby nodded sagely. I agree with the assignments. His eyes regarded Dickerson. You okay with this? Really? Dickerson thrummed his fingers on the table's plasteel surface. I am. Just want to know more about what I'm dealing with. Can't blame you there, Talby said. Von On refuses to go into details. Believe me, we've tried every line of reasoning we can. Essentially, it's not budging. Spoken with Black about it, sir? Dickerson asked. Not as such, Talby admitted. I imagine she and the commander have discussed it ad nauseum, however. Kelly met Talby's interrogating stare. Do we have an equipment manifest for this mission? We do, Talby said. I planned on talking to both of you about it as soon as the shift began, but we were interrupted. One way of putting it, sir, Dickerson grinned. The grin was catching, Talby's own face leaving its grim and icy stare behind. Understatement, I know. You can take a look, but it's pretty cut and dried. The list merely includes ammunition, consumables, suits, and small arms. Von On and the shipyards are taking care of the rest. Lovely, Dickerson said. They're printing our equipment now, sir? I mean, I don't know for sure, but I believe that's the cue, Talby said. We're not even bringing our own support craft? Kelly asked. Talby shook his head. No skiffs, no SV. Those will be provided. Dickerson sighed. Sir, this just sounds like a clusterfuck waiting to happen. Aren't you glad you joined up? Talby asked ironically. So damn glad, sir. So damn glad, Dickerson said in a lazy drawl. Is there an updated timeline? Kelly asked. Talby nodded again, but his easy smile had disappeared. 5 shifts, he said. Not long. Went will have to take over my duties, and there's going to be a big dearth of jarheads around here. I know, Talby said. We're shoring up the numbers with former SFN volunteers. Plus more are coming from Solfed. Should be here by the time you get back. Dickerson looked as though he were going to sigh again, but held it back. Aye, sir. Hopefully Went won't completely screw them up by then. Now you sound like a gunnery sergeant, Talby said. Hoorah! With that sorted, Talby said, I don't have anything else for you two. Despite the, he coughed embarrassingly, tardiness, the commander and I couldn't be happier with the way the Marines mustered. Glad to hear it, sir, Kelly said. Dismissed. She and Dickerson rose from their seats and walked into the corridor. Hungry? Yes, he said. We have a 2-hour break and I intend to eat everything there is. She walked a little more closely to him. Can I offer you something better? After you take a shower, of course. You stink. Ah, shower time, he leered. My favorite time.